government now regards itself as a manager of society, a manager of people. You have to herd them into the proper way of thinking and the proper way of speaking and the proper way of relating to each other. It's it's parental on steroids, if you like. They are the ones who know how to behave, and they are the ones who will tell the rest of us what to do.
Bruce Pardy, back like you never left, man. Thank you for humoring me again today.
Oh, listen, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you.
Oh man, well, I try not to like gush over people on my podcast because it makes all the listeners cringe. But Payman and I have talked on the live stream about you a couple times, and you made me feel like sufficiently like a chimpanzee in our last conversation. So it's always an honor to talk to somebody who can like. The last episode we did together, there is a moment where there's about a 4-second pause where the processor in my brain just stopped working. And I had to say, like, I'm here, I'm listening. I'm just trying to make this all come together in my head. So that's my way of saying thank you, Bruce. I really appreciate your time again today, man. I know you're so busy and I've been wanting to talk to you about these issues. So thank you for joining me again.
Oh, listen, it really is my pleasure. Thanks for having these conversations.
Oh, yeah.
They're really important right now.
Well, and I think now more than ever, because it looks like the time is running out on us in this country. Yeah. And, so when news of bills C2, C8, and C9, and I guess now C12, because I guess C2 has been bifurcated into another bill.
Yes.
You were the first person that came to mind. I was like, I have to talk to Bruce about this. I know you just talked to me a few weeks ago, but you're the guy I think who can bring clarity and shed light on this from both a legal and a philosophical perspective. So I just want to open with a general question. Bruce, have you had a chance to take a look at these bills? And if so, what's your interpretation?
Yes, of course I have. And they are all very different from each other, but they are all part of a piece. They're part of a theme. And I would add to that list C5, which is also very different from the rest, but it reflects a governmental philosophy. They all do, which is that the government is in charge. It will decide what to do, and it needs to supervise you. So let's just go through these various bills. The C2 is the border bill. And as you say, C2 has largely been abandoned in favor of C12, which is a modified version of C2, not as extreme. So that's a good thing. C5 is it's in two parts, and the second part I think is more important. It's the Building Canada Act, which is the bill that allows the government to select important projects to bypass all of its rules about things. C8 and 9, C8 is the Telecommunications Act, and C9 is the amendments to the Criminal Code, which imports a new definition of hatred and so on, which we can get into. But they're all of a piece in the sense that they are all supervisory, and they are enabling the discretionary work of government to decide case by case what ought to happen. So in the case of the Criminal Code amendments in C9, what you've got there are additional criminal code provisions which can be used but won't necessarily be used, right? So the number of, just to give you an example, we have hate speech provisions already in our criminal code. The number of hate speech prosecutions is very low, okay? Well, that's fine, because maybe it's not happening, but maybe it is happening, and the powers that be are simply using their discretion to decide when to enforce the law. So let's just start with a big point, which is this. When you have a plethora of laws in your country, and those laws are available for the authorities to enforce if and when they choose, selectively, then you are not governed by a rule of law. You are governed by that discretion. And that's the situation that we are in now. I mean, the law is becoming weaponized in the sense that it is there now to facilitate the ability of enforcement officials and bureaucrats and technocrats and politicians to decide at any particular moment what should be done, what tool, what law can we pull out here to apply to this situation so as to fix it in the way that we think is right. Okay, and that means the law itself is not governing; it is the discretion of those people that is governing, and that means you are subject to the rule of persons, not to the rule of law.
Mm.
Now, that's not to say that there can never be discretion. I mean, there has to be some discretion, but we are now in an era where discretion is the general rule.
Okay, and so Bruce, I may have mentioned this in our previous conversation. I know when I talked to John Carpe from the JCC, I mentioned this as well. But it seems to me like to take that a step further, being ruled by this, individual discretion. It feels like we have abandoned the rule of law for the rule of emotion, meaning if you make somebody feel bad, then these laws apply to you. And that's what these laws, why we're bringing these laws into our society, because hate speech, for example, is entirely subjective. What's offensive to you is not offensive to me, and on and on and on and on and on down the line. So we are governing according to, well, there's two parts to it. Number one, you have protected groups. And so because you have protected groups, which you and I talked about previously, these people are not subject to the same laws that you and I would be, because they're a victim. They're considered a victim class.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So they are given certain discretionary, they are afforded certain luxuries that you and I would not be. But furthermore, the way that hate speech is being defined and interpreted means that it's being interpreted in a way that states that if I say something that is offensive to a person in a protected group, then those laws would apply to me, because what I'm doing is perceived as being accusatory or aggressive toward that group, right?
Sure. Let's just go to the bill. I'll just read out.
Let's do it.
The definition of hatred that they are proposing to use. It says this: hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification, and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. Now, two things to note there. Number one, nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows where the line is between detestation and disdain. I mean, so if you're walking down the street, you're thinking, I'm going to say something to that person. And I think, oh, well, I have to make sure that, I know that I can disdain them, but I can't detest them. So that's hard. I mean, how does that help you know what it is you can say and not say?
Right.
Okay. That's the first thing. Number two, note that what it is that they're describing, and they say so in the definition, is an emotion. Hatred means the emotion of. And there are provisions in this bill that criminalize the emotion of hatred, not the violent act. Now, let's be very clear. The idea that violent acts should be criminal is not controversial. I mean, of course, that's what criminal law is for. So if you go and attack somebody, regardless of who it is, of course, that should be a criminal act. And that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about, in this particular provision that I'm going to talk to you about right now, the creation of an added offense, an included offense, an additional offense. And this is the words of the section, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred, that is motivated by the emotion. In other words, if you commit a violent act, then number one, you may have committed a criminal offense, of course. But if you're motivated by hatred, then you've committed a second offense. Note the implication. if you're not motivated by hatred and yet you commit a violent act, then you are going to be less punished than the other guy who is motivated by this emotion. Right? We are now distinguishing, setting up two classes of violent acts. One not so bad, and one much more serious because you're motivated by hate. Okay. Let's do a comparison. Let's say you get someone who commits two assaults. In one of them, they commit an assault randomly against the first person they see on the street, and they beat them to a pulp for no particular reason. And in the second one, they target somebody because of their identity, and they beat them to a pulp too. Question: is one of those offenses worse than the other one? This provision suggests that one of them is more serious than the other one. That makes no sense to me. Here's what's happened. In both cases, you have attacked somebody and you have injured them. You have committed a criminal offense, and the offense consists of the violent act. You should be punished for both of those offenses. But what this provision is saying is that the second one is more serious than the first.
Mm.
That is doing exactly what you described, which is putting people into different categories of victims.
Yeah, and under this, within this this bill, it would justify a doubling of the sentence if the act was deemed as being motivated by hatred, right? So if you were to get 3 years for aggravated assault for walking up to a random person in the street and beating the shit out of them,
yes.
Then if let's say, and I know that this is a very superficial example, but let's say it was determined that the assault was motivated by racism, right? Which, again, how do you determine that unless the guy's screaming racial slurs as he's beating you, right? But if you were to determine that assault was motivated by racism, you would get 6 years in prison. Right. So again, but this the problem. I mean, there's a million problems with this, Bruce, and that's why we're talking today. But yes, just on this topic alone, like the problem is, how do you define what hate is? If I walk up to a random person and beat them half to death in the middle of the street, is that not a hateful act?
Well, yeah, but so for my money, the answer is, well, one would be inclined to say yes, but let's just be careful with that because. And I, as you know, I'm not a psychologist, but one of the features, as I am led to understand, of people that we label as sociopaths and psychopaths, is a lack of emotion.
Mm.
Like, they don't care. And the point is this: what difference does it make if the person cares this way or that way? The point is, they have committed a wrong against somebody else. And let's distinguish between two different concepts. One concept is mens rea, which you require for a criminal offense, generally speaking. And that's appropriate, right? You want the act and you want the intent to commit the act. That is, we want the act to be yours in order for you to be guilty. But mens rea, the intent, is a very different concept than emotion, the emotion of. Okay? We do punish criminal intent. We punish mens rea, a guilty mind. But we're not in the habit of punishing emotion. That is, your motivation. Your motivation, who cares what your motivation was? You intentionally committed the criminal act. Therefore, you should be punished. What this is doing is wandering away from mens rea and saying, well, in addition to that, we're also going to punish you for wrongthink. If you think about this wrongly, if you are motivated by this but not this, then we are going to punish you more. That's a twisted and dangerous way to think of the criminal law.
Yeah, and so part of this bill is a law against the display of symbols, right? And within
Sure.
C9, they reference, of course, the Nazi swastika and the SS bolts, right? Of course. It's like these people have no other reference to anything else in history other than Hitler and Nazi Germany, and they still don't know anything about it, you know?
Right.
Like, I this crucifix I wear around my neck, I generally wear it under my shirt, but I've been wearing it out recently because I feel this is a symbol that's going to be targeted. I feel that the swastika and, you know, the SS bolts are the entry, the gateway into criminalizing symbols in general. Because again, when you have these protected classes, right? I had a long conversation with a lesbian couple earlier this week, right? And we got all the way to the end of the conversation until religion came into the picture, and they asked me if I was a person who believed in God, and I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. And they couldn't believe that we were able to maintain a rational, logical conversation for an hour where we agreed on most things, and that I was identified myself as a Christian. And what I fear is in the future that symbol, because not within Christianity itself, but within the mainstream bubble, right? Christianity is viewed as existing in opposition to the protected groups, that any symbol representing Christianity will be outlawed as well. And then we're going to run into a circumstance where we enter a world where no symbols for anything can be displayed anywhere because everybody's offended by everything. And just going off of what you said earlier, it's like we are creating a society of psychopaths because you're going to be restricted from feeling anything or expressing anything ever, other than, you know, some superficial forced emotion of joy and happiness.
Well, so let's take this directly on. Do we think that in a free country, one should not be prohibited from waving the Nazi flag or not?
I don't think so. No.
Everybody knows what it means. You know, and maybe not everybody, but they should. They should know what it means. They should know what all the implications are. Should you, if you are living in a free country with freedom of expression, should the government be able to prohibit you from waving the Nazi flag? And I'm inclined to say probably not.
No.
Because you haven't crossed the line of committing violence or threatening to commit violence against people. Now, maybe by implication, you are endorsing Hitler, but we're talking now about symbols and expression. And so if we had a genuine freedom of expression, then those things would have to be okay. I don't mean okay as in, you know, you're fine if you do that. I mean, you know, you're an idiot if you choose to do that. But legally, is the government permitted to decide for the rest of us what it is that it's okay to display? My answer is probably no.
Well, and we have to know who the bad people are.
Yes.
That's my argument for free speech all the time. You have to allow anybody to say anything at any time, because that's how you figure out who the bad people are. That's how you figure out who you want to stay away from. And that's the danger of the society we're creating. We're creating a society, this amorphous, androgynous society where nobody displays anything and nobody feels anything. Therefore, we're unable to identify each other as individuals. And to be honest with you, I feel like that is the underpinning motivation, is to remove the individual identity.
Well, yes, this is part of the supervision that I described before. You know, government now regards itself as a manager of society, a manager of people. You have to herd them into the proper way of thinking and the proper way of speaking and the proper way of relating to each other. It's parental on steroids, if you like. They are the ones who know how to behave, and they are the ones who will tell the rest of us what to do. I mean, it's very simple. They don't trust the members of society now to be individuals and to decide for themselves how it is that they're going to express themselves and relate to each other. And in a free country, and an actual free country, which more and more we don't have, you're going to have conflict between people. That's fine. As long as it's not violence, conflict is fine. You can have disagreements and you can have competing symbols. You can have arguments. As long as it doesn't turn into violence, you're fine.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it does, that happens at times, right? Like in a society that feels and thinks and and thinks deeply and passionately about issues. It does. I'm not saying violence in terms of blood in the streets and civil war,
Right.
but at times when you feel passionately about something, you can behave in a manner that would be perceived as being aggressive, or see. And this is the other problem that we're having too, is that how we've redefined violence.
Well,
right?
Because it's a very good point, because that brings us, I think, to one of the other provisions in here, right? Because I mean, aggression and violence are two different things. Mm. Violence is not okay in my books. Violence is the line beyond which the state actually does have a mandate to interfere. Like, okay, keep the peace, because we're not living in an anarchy. You don't want things to devolve into a physical battle, but we are we've long wandered away from that line, and we're way over in some other territory. And this other provision of this bill reflects that. So here's what it says. This is the one that is trying to prohibit people from protesting so as to create fear in other people. Here's what it says. Everyone commits an offense who engages in any conduct with the intent to provoke a state of fear in a person in order to impede their access to a building or structure for religious worship or for administrative, social, cultural, or sports activities, educational institutions, and so on. In other words, this is not punishing violence. If they can accuse you or show that you had an intent to provoke a state of fear, who knows what that means? So let me give you an example. Last year, at my university, there was a strike by the teaching assistants and graduate students. And you know what strikes are like. And this is not a particularly, militaristic group of people. They're generally very nice people and very gentlemanly and controlled. But as in with many groups, there's a fringe, and there were gatherings every morning during the strike, and mostly very peaceful. But I walked to work and I walked past these groups, and usually it's just totally fine. But on occasion, they got to being a little bit aggressive, yelling. And at one point, somebody recognized me and sort of yelled at me by name and in a disparaging way and so on. It's no big deal. But if you had discretionary enforcement of this provision that I just described, it would be possible to frame that behavior as conduct with the intent to provoke a state of fear in me as I walked by this strike gathering, in order to impede my access to the school, the law school building I was going to. Okay. That should not be illegal. If you want to yell and chant and try to intimidate without violence, to persuade somebody of your point of view and to persuade them that they're wrong and you're right and they shouldn't be doing that, that is part of being in a free country. Mm. And you're entitled to be able to try to aggressively influence people that way. But not according to this provision.
And that provision reads to me like it's a direct reference to the Freedom Convoy.
I think you're right.
Right? The thing that always confused me was how anybody in Ottawa felt threatened in any way. I mean, obviously they weren't. Nobody felt threatened by this group of people. When you walk downtown Ottawa, it was a peaceful protest. People are in hot tubs and playing hockey and having barbecues, and eventually erected a soundstage and brought in DJs, right? Like,
Right.
if you lived in Ottawa, yes, it was annoying. The noise was irritating. The honking probably would have driven you nuts if it was happening at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, right? But you didn't feel directly threatened. However, that was the story and that was the line in order to get the Freedom Convoy shut down.
Yes, but and here's the very important point, though. The words in this provision are to provoke a state of fear. Now, you and I are thinking of those words in the traditional way. That is, we're assuming that it means to provoke a state of fear about the possibility of violence. Okay? That's a threat. That's an assault. That's not what they're getting at. If you have a group of people in your downtown in a bunch of trucks that are advocating for an ideology that is contrary to yours and stands against everything you believe in, then now we are into provoking a different kind of fear. And that's the kind of fear I think they're talking about. This is a state of fear that until recently has been unknown to the law. But this is why they invoked the Emergencies Act, right? This was actually a threat to a particular kind of ideology. And to push against those ideas is now considered to provoke a state of fear.
Yeah, and you know, going back to your example of the strike at your school you're walking by. Now, let's say that protest was a Antifa protest. They're protesting, you know, something to do with trans rights, right? Sure. And you're walking by and they scream, Bruce Pardy is a fascist.
Right.
And it's the 5th day of this. You fucking had enough. You've been yelled at every day on your walk to work. So you just, in a moment of weakness, you scream back, trans women aren't women.
Right.
I feel like under this new set of laws, you could then be charged and prosecuted for hate under these hate speech laws for responding to that original statement, because you are responding with a derogatory statement, an inflammatory statement to a protected group.
Well, let's possibly, but let's just
I mean, it's a hypothetical, right?
But the point I want to make is this: I think we're already there, even without this new bill. So we already have hate speech provisions in the criminal code. So let me just read the most problematic one. This is the existing section of the criminal code. This is 319(2). Everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group and is guilty of an indictable offense. Okay? That's all you need. That is all you need right now in the criminal law. Now, right now they're missing the definition, but they put the definition in, and the definition is as I read it to you earlier. But that's the definition. Here's the real kicker. They've used those words in the definition in this bill, I suspect, because those are the words used by the Supreme Court of Canada to describe a situation in which it's okay to prohibit hate speech. Okay, this is the Supreme Court of Canada's fault as much as it is the government's fault. So if you did that today, as you described, you know, you say trans women are men. Does that get you into trouble? We don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah. We're spinning ourselves just deeper and deeper into this hole, you know, like that. You know, we often look, Hitler, again, he's the only historical tyrannical figure these people know. So Hitler is always, you're literally Hitler, Bruce. The swastika and the SS insignias can no longer be displayed. Like anybody, I have never in my life, I've been in Canada a long time. I have never, ever seen a Nazi flag on display, except surprisingly at the Freedom Convoy when there was a photographer there to take a picture of it.
Right.
At a hotel that costs roughly $1,300 a night to sleep in. So I don't know. Maybe the Nazis are very well funded in this country. I don't know. But I have never, ever encountered anybody who would consider themselves a neo-Nazi. But what scares me about this, man, is that we are moving in the other direction to the mirror image, to the polar opposite, the mirror image of the polar opposite, right? Like, if you want to talk about a dangerous ideology, I would argue that communism is a far more dangerous ideology than anything that we saw come out of Mussolini or Hitler.
Well,
right?
So for my money, though, they're not really very much different.
They're not different,
right?
They're not. No, they're the same thing. They're polar opposites.
Well, there are some detailed differences, but they're. So I like to describe the political spectrum as this. I like the horseshoe idea. Have you heard this horseshoe idea?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You take the political spectrum left and right, and then you take the string that you've drawn and you pull it up, and the two sides come down in a horseshoe or a circle, and then the two ends come close to meeting at the bottom,
mm-hmm.
and they belong together because their ideas are similar in the sense that they both believe in group values. That is, insisting upon governing for you make the individual conform to the ideas of the group. And communism and fascism are just two variations on a theme.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that might be a technical distinction, but
no. What I've always said is this: is fascism is for the state, and they don't care how you feel about it because it's militant in nature. Communism is for the people masquerading, or is the people masquerading, or the state masquerading as the people, and that's basically all. The difference really is, to me, right? Is that
sure? Okay.
Communism is more deceptive and subversive in that it requires the collective to take part in it, whereas fascism doesn't really care what the collective believes because it takes a more militant approach.
I'm not sure
military
that
approach.
Way. I think their means might be a little bit different, but the ends are the same. So, in pure communism, you could say that the state, owns the means of production. All the factories and farms and so on are owned by the state, whereas in fascism, you still have corporations, for example, but the corporations have been compromised, and they are working with the state together, hand in hand, to promote a certain set of ideas. So the institutional arrangement might be different, but the philosophy is very much the same.
Yeah, and so the term that I've used to describe the system that we now find ourselves in is communal fascism.
Sure.
It's culturally Marxist, operationally fascist.
Sure.
We now find ourselves at the worst of both worlds. And these bills are just another step further.
And let's make a point about the law. In all of these historical regimes that we're familiar with, including the Nazis, including the Soviets, including the Chinese Communist Party, everything that those regimes did and are doing was legal because they controlled the law. You can make the law in your own image so that what you do is in accordance with the law. So, in other words, it's not an argument that, well, what you're doing is illegal. Well, it's not illegal. So the law is not a protection. If your laws are controlled by those who want to abuse you, then the law is no protection whatsoever. And people, I think, have to get off the track of thinking the law is there to protect you. We are now in an era of not rule of law, but rule by law. That is, The law is used now as a tool to manage your behavior. It's just taken off the shelf when they need to. I mean, we need a policy or a law or a guideline or a directive. Let's just make them do this. I mean, you could see that in very distinct terms during COVID, right? The law tomorrow, the rule tomorrow is going to be this. That's ruled by law. Those edicts were not illegal for the most part. They were authorized by statute. Okay? They're legal. That doesn't make them okay.
And you know what's also really troubling to me is that, so in Canada we have our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In the United States you have the American Constitution, which in my opinion is a far superior document than our charter. But the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is there to protect the citizen against the rule of tyrannical law. But it seems like as time has gone on, and the more that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms has just been repeatedly infringed upon by government,
right,
that it's at this point it's null and void. It means nothing. It's just a piece of paper that has some ideas on it.
Well, let's just consider for a moment. I generally agree with you about the U.S. Constitution. I prefer it to the Canadian version.
Yeah,
but some of the content of the American Bill of Rights is the same or similar to that of the Charter, right? So if you look at freedom of expression, for example, both documents have a very basic statement that you're going to have free speech, and yet they've ended up meaning different things. Now, whose doing is that? Okay, that's the courts. Those are our courts not giving our provision the same kind of robust meaning that eventually they ended up with in the U.S. Okay? It is our institutional problem. Our institutions are manned by people with a particular kind of ideology in their heads. And don't get me wrong, there are people with similar ideologies in institutions in the U.S., but there are also other people with a different ideology, and they're having at least a battle about it over time, right? So right now in the U.S. Supreme Court, they have 5 conservatives and 4 liberals, and I use liberal in the modern leftist sense, not in the original liberty sense. Okay, so they have a battle going on. We do not have a battle going on.
No,
because we have a consensus. Essentially, I don't mean to overstate it. There are individuals who disagree, including judges. But proportionately, there is no real battle going on. Our courts are progressive courts, and they have over time been interpreting the Charter in a progressive way. They have, in my mind anyway, have taken the words of the text of the Charter and effectively changed the intent and the meaning of what the Charter maybe should have meant or was intended to mean into something else. But this underlines the point, right? The Charter itself does not rule. The courts rule. And if your courts are peopled by a certain kind of ideology, then that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, and that's what it seems like we're dealing with here, is that we're dealing with this large-scale ideological possession, one that continuously writes new laws and enacts new laws in order to justify what it actually wants to do in service to the ideology. So like you said, when you have courts, let's say 95% of them are being informed by this ideology. It's the ideology that supersedes everything.
Sure. And because let's just acknowledge the difficulty here. Every written constitution has an Achilles heel, and that is that they are written in words, and words contain ambiguities. So no matter how hard you try, and we could have done a much better job, but no matter how hard you try to draft carefully and clearly, you can never nail down for sure what you mean to resist the inclinations of other people, meaning the judges, to interpret it in a different way. Okay? It's a very difficult thing to do, to prepare a document, especially a short one, that will clearly indicate what the answer is supposed to be on all problems. That can't be done. So you are always subject to this problem. And I would prefer that we start to see the law as what it actually is rather than what we would like to imagine it to be. The law is a ritual, an anthropological ritual to justify political decisions. It gives it the markings of legitimacy because it has trappings and it has that we anoint people to this role. We make them sort of the high priests of the legal institution. We say that there's precedent involved and principles involved, and they have to do the job in a certain way. And we think, well, therefore, it's going to be done in a different way than a simply crass political decision. Well, it's got all these trappings. It is still, at the end of the day, a political decision. It's not fundamentally different than the other kinds of decisions that are made by people who have power over you. So I think it doesn't get the kind of scrutiny that it deserves.
Well, I don't think it does because people have still fooled themselves into believing that the law itself is ambiguous and that it doesn't favor one side or another or a particular ideology. But it
often is ambiguous. It's just that it can be used to favor one party or the other. If you're the person making the decision and you have the power to do that, then that's what you can do.
Right. And say, for example, you have like our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that, is a fairly generalized document, but then you create a series of laws underneath it that kind of override what exists in that document and then you have, say, for example, you have a high profile case like Jordan Peterson, who's dragged in front of a human rights tribunal, found guilty for saying really innocuous things and things that were taken way out of context.
But hold on,
right?
But it's even worse than that.
Okay.
So Jordan Peterson was never found guilty of anything. Like, they didn't even have a disciplinary hearing about Jordan Peterson. This is pre-hearing, pre-finding, pre-punishment. This is an administrative body, the College of Psychologists, deciding, without having gone through a hearing, that they have the power to dictate to him to take media training. Just because. Okay. And the court said, fine, no problem. You're the agency. You do what you want. Okay, that's the degree of trouble that we're in. This is before a hearing, before evidence, before argument, before a finding of guilty. This is the imposition of a remedial step, which is like a punishment without any finding of guilt.
Yeah. And so, Bruce, I want to, there's so much there. I want to take this another step. So Bill C-8 stipulates that basically the Canadian government can remove you from the internet.
Yes.
And all communication services. That means telephone. I mean, literally, you can't even use a fax machine legally if you're found guilty of the laws in this bill. And so that means it could affect. And here's the other.
Look, before you go on, so
yeah,
it's not even that. Like, it's not even that you're found guilty of something. So this is again part of the pattern. This does not set out a threshold that says, oh well, if you cross this threshold, then here are the consequences. It's not even that. It's the government saying, we're in charge of the safety of the system. So if there's something that we think endangers the safety of the system, we have the power to tell the service provider to take you off. That is all.
Wow. And of course, there are a million different ways that they can coax the service provider. Now, one of them, which is in the bill, is that they can charge the service provider up to $15 million a day for your existence on their network. They can charge you up to $50,000 a day if you continue to use the internet after you've been removed.
So many, many, many years ago, when I was a teenager, for some reason, I was I was a nerd back then. I decided that I would go to Ottawa. I took a train to Ottawa just to go visit. I wanted to go see the Parliament buildings. I wanted to sit in the House of Commons during question period and so on. And on this trip, I think it might have been my first trip to Ottawa as a young adult. On this trip, I just happened to remember, I don't know why it struck me, but it did. I remember being in downtown Ottawa near the Parliament buildings, and a guy was wearing a T-shirt, and it said, Ottawa, we run things. And that memory has stayed with me. And that encapsulates the whole idea. They run things. They run everything. They think they run everything. And if things are not being run by them, then it's not being run very well. That includes now the internet. But it also includes your speech. They run things. And until we get rid of that idea, to delegitimize that idea, they do not run things. In a free country, the government does not run things. Until you get rid of that idea, toast.
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that as a teenager, you had the thought to go to Ottawa and walk around and look at the Parliament buildings. When I was a teenager, all I was concerned about was how to get beer and get girls.
Well, I told you.
Therein lies the difference between us. But that's it. And it is that tyrannical view of itself, that it truly believes that it has not just a responsibility, but it's almost ordained by some, and I wouldn't say God because I don't believe it believes in God, but ordained by some otherworldly power to rule over the people of this country. I mean, that's what I read, but that's what I see when I read through these bills. See, I'm a nerd now as an adult, and I've actually sat and read through these bills. I sat and read 140 pages of Bill C2, which was brain numbing.
Sure.
But what scares me when you read this stuff is that it's as if the Canadian people are being dictated to. And I think it's been that way for a long time. But for people watching this, I encourage you to go read this stuff, because you are being dictated to. These aren't propositions. These aren't ideas. These are diktats.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and so.
But people, like, people believe in this idea, though. I mean, if you ask a random Canadian on the street,
no.
And you ask them, you know, do you really think that government should be running things and solving social problems? They would say, well, what do you mean? Of course. That's what government is. That's why we have it, isn't it? Mm. The idea is very deeply ingrained. Most people don't know how else it could be. And we have gotten away from any other vision of how to live in a free country.
And you know, the thing is, Bruce, is I want to go. I'll go back to something that we talked about in our first conversation, but I feel like it's because these people have never been free. And you know, we talked about the history of the Canadian identity and the Canadian, well, at least the mainstream Canadian line of thinking in our first conversation. But I think but it is that line of thinking that allows for stuff like this to happen. And, you know, the thing I find with most Canadians is that they see bills like these and they're like, yeah, it's troubling, but it's never going to apply to me. It's like the Patriot Act in the United States after 9/11 or the NDAA in 2012 when Barack Obama made it, when his administration made it legal to detain anybody, anywhere, anytime, mm-hmm. for any reason, mm-hmm. right? Yeah, maybe if you're a good citizen and you're within, you know, good standing of the current government, maybe it doesn't apply to you. But the way that I always put it to liberal Canadians is, let's say Pierre Poilievre is Donald Trump, and let's say Donald Trump is the person you believe him to be. He's not, but let's just for the sake of argument, say that Donald Trump is literally Hitler and Pierre Poilievre is a branch off of that tree.
Sure.
Would you be comfortable as a liberal, and liberal meaning leftist in this conversation here, with a person like Pierre Poilievre in power and having this sort of power?
Yes, I know where you're going, and I get it, and I agree with you, but I don't think that my experience has been that argument doesn't land most of the time, because that's not the way people think about it. And in fact, on both ends of this spectrum, there's a lot of common thinking, which is everything is okay as long as the right people are in power. And our job is to make sure that the wrong people are not in power. End of story. And as long as the right people are in power, they should direct us all to proper ends. I mean, you will hear this from conservatives too, that this job of the proper job of the state is to direct us to proper ends, proper standards of behavior, proper virtues, proper kinds of speech. I mean, the traditionally conservative regimes have also been hard on speech in different ways, different kind of speech, of course, but they've censored speech. So both of these ends that come together down at the bottom think that it's important for the right people to have the power, and the existence of the power is not the problem. It's the people in control of it. Whereas the liberty people among us, the classical liberals, the libertarians, the individualists, understand that it is the power itself that is the problem.
Yes.
As long as somebody has the power, we have a problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're seeing the conservative campaign machine rev up again, right? Pierre Poilievre is starting to pop up in the media, and all the younger conservatives are starting to give interviews and stuff. So that's the first signal that an election is on the way.
Sure.
And what concerns me is that, let's say the conservatives win this upcoming election, because it's been the conservative right that has been the very vocal minority that has brought attention to these issues. Now, I do believe in some cases it is a genuine concern for our freedom and liberty, but the underlying motive is that it's the other team. So therefore, we got to pin them to this and bring down the other team. But what happens if Pierre Poilievre and the conservatives win the next election? Where do those voices go? Because if the conservatives start bringing in enacting legislation like this, where does that leave us? Yeah,
so my concern about the conservatives is not that they will be as draconian as the liberals, or I certainly hope that they won't be. I mean, and they're making lots of the right noises about all of this. My concern, as it has long been, is that fundamentally a conservative government will not change very much, not fix it, so that it cannot happen anymore, right? So we had a decade of Stephen Harper's government, and we did not have, the disaster that we had during Justin Trudeau. But on the other hand, we did not have any fundamental change in the way the country is governed in the institutional sense, so that as soon as Justin Trudeau got in, the whole thing could, go off in the wrong direction. And so if you're really going to solve this problem, you need to do it in a fundamental way. You almost need to do it in a constitutional way, which is very, very difficult to do in this country.
I would say almost impossible, right?
But if you're not doing something fundamental, then you're not doing very much, because we live in a managerial age.
Yeah.
And you have to change the way government works from managerialism to something else, to what people call a night watchman state, that is limited to keeping the peace and other kinds of very basic things, and not doing all the things that it does right now because it thinks its job is to manage. even conservative governments, both federally and provincially, manage in not a great deal different way than the Liberals and the NDP do. They all believe in managerialism. And the Conservatives are no different.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of "leave me the fuck aloneism." That's kind of my
that's right.
my ideology.
Yep.
So Bruce, before I risk burning you out here, I want to talk about Bill C-5 because this is the first I'm hearing anybody bring this up. So, can you talk about the bill and what is in it that concerns you?
Yeah. So there's two parts, and the part that I'm most concerned about is the second part, is the Building Canada Act. And it's, by the way, it's no longer a bill; it's passed. I mean, it's already been passed and approved and in effect. So what it does is give essentially the federal cabinet the power to make a list of nation building projects. And if your project's on the list, then you can circumvent all of the other rules that are contained in federal statutes, like environmental assessment and so on. In other words, what you've got a federal government that's created legislation that is full of red tape. And then another statute that says, oh, well, we're going to give you the power to get around your own red tape. So if your project is favored and gets on the list, then you are allowed to get away from all the rules that apply to everybody else. Okay. This is a terrific, perfect example of managerialism on the part of the government. We are going to take control, and we're going to decide which of you have to comply with all our rules or not.
Well, it's like they're saying we're going to break all your legs and then determine which of you get wheelchairs.
Sure.
So what are the I mean, they're obvious, but Bruce, let's lay this out there for people listening. What are the inherent dangers in this?
Well, but you'll notice though the responses to this bill, and this for my money shows how the various interests are compromised. So those people who want to have things built, let's develop pipelines and ports and so on, think, oh, this is great because has potential for getting around all of the roadblocks in the way of all these developments, and that's to some extent true. It has the potential anyway to get your thing through. Okay, so your short-term interest is to do that, and therefore let's support this initiative. Okay, bad call, because what you're doing is establishing yet another precedent for how the government is entitled to take the thing on all by itself. Note how this is put together. This is like the cabinet has the job of deciding how to build the country. They're going to put together the list of preferred projects, and the government's going to champion those and get them through to the end zone. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to have a competitive economy, a free market where people make investments and make their own decisions. And sure, you can have some rules, but those rules are supposed to apply to everybody.
Mm.
And they're supposed to be understandable, and they're not supposed to make it impossible to have an economy. Mm. That's what we have, essentially. And this is the solution. That means that the solution to your government roadblocks is to give the government the job of planning the economy.
It's the solution to big government is bigger government.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Correct.
What's interesting, Bruce, is Brave New Normal has grown and traveled a lot. And I just so happen to be in the one province in Canada that most appreciates the podcast that I do. So when I'm out walking around town or I go places, I run into people who are viewers and listeners. And I've had a few interactions with oil and gas executives. I'm talking high up, the top floor guys.
Right.
And all of them have said to me that the problem that we have in Canada is that we have a government so big and so involved that we can't get projects off the ground because we raise the money, we bring in the investment. So let's just round figure, $500 million for a project,
Yep.
all privately funded. And during that period that we are, in the process of building, the government sticks in its various straws. I liken it to the milkshake analogy at the end of There Will Be Blood for anybody who's seen that movie. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. The government puts in its straws, right? Regulatory fees, processing fees, accessibility fees, diversity, equity, inclusion fees.
Sure.
And by the time they get halfway through the project, the money's gone.
Sure.
And now they have to try to do a second round of fundraising with investors who expected that their initial investment was going to cover the entire project.
Sure.
And he said it's they've been doing this over and over and over again for years, to a point now where the real money won't come here. They're not interested.
Of course.
Right.
And absolutely. And you combine that with the uncertainty that it might be that even at the end of the day, the thing doesn't get built.
Exactly. Right. Because by the time the project is completed, there's a new series of environmental regulations that have been brought in that sure. makes that project unable to even start.
And then there's the unknown of, Aboriginal consultation or veto. I mean, nobody knows now what the situation is supposed to be. The courts can't tell us exactly what has to be done. The government is wishy-washy on whether or not they're in favor of it or against it. I mean, it's a crazy place to invest.
Oh, absolutely. And so, where I was going with this, Bruce, was just kind of a comment on your previous point, was that we are in a situation now because nobody's interested in us anymore, that government is the only answer to government. Right. So, right, exactly what you said, right? Like they create all these regulations, and really at the end of the day, guys, what this is it's just a way to siphon money out of stuff.
Sure.
And put it into the government coffers.
Sure.
They don't that is the entire purpose. So what they've done is they've created a scenario where, for example, Mark Carney wants to green light some pipelines. Well, nobody's interested in building them because they're too terrified of losing their money. So government says, well, then you know what? We'll do it ourselves. Let's create another stack of legislation that's going to enable us to fast track these projects. And who pays for it? Us. We do. Mm-hmm. So our taxes go up. We're already struggling. We're already like it. What I'm trying to say is that this is just a compounding problem. And now we are introducing legislation that gives government the power to literally silence anybody who might say anything otherwise, on the internet. Bruce Pardy and Jason James could disappear because we espouse views that are considered hateful to some.
I liked, and I always forget who did the quote. It's I think it's a South American philosopher. I'll have to look it up again. But one of my favorite quotes is, dying societies accumulate laws like dying men accumulate remedies. The more laws you have, the worse off you are because things are going down the toilet. And that's the kind of situation I think we're getting into. We have so many laws about so many things at so many levels of government. It becomes impossible to do anything as a sort of a entrepreneur. That doesn't work. It does not work anymore, and that the reflection of a fundamental malaise, if you like, of the society that you're in.
And just to bolster that, like every entrepreneur that I know, every young entrepreneur that I know, including myself, we're all registering our businesses in the United States. Right. I don't know one person who has created a business here, at least in the space that I'm in, that has registered that business in Canada. You got to be out of your mind. Right. So Bruce, I want to ask you a purely subjective question here. Okay. You're a guy, you're a professor of law, right? You understand this stuff. You know it. I'm sure you could probably close your eyes and read a number of long forgotten laws and provisions that none of us would have any idea of. So as somebody who understands the law in the way that you do, and at the risk of once again blowing smoke, taking the philosophical approach I appreciate so much to hear from you, what goes through your mind when you read stuff like this, when you see this coming into the country that you are a citizen of, and where you teach law, where you are a professor? What goes through your mind? What are your own personal thoughts on all this?
Well, my conclusion at the moment, and I do not mean to be facetious, is that Alberta needs to leave.
Agreed.
At the moment, I don't see a path to fixing the country in any other way. I mean, we alluded before to the difficulty in amending the Canadian Constitution. Even if it was procedurally possible to do, that politically impossible right now because of what the people think. You can't. This is a ship you can't turn around right now. But in Alberta, you have a critical mass of people who maybe, and it's a big maybe, because we don't know if it's a big enough critical mass yet, but maybe understand that this ship is sinking and they want out. That's the possibility right now. I don't know what the chances are. People have asked me what the chances are. I have no idea. I'm not in Alberta. I can't give them an educated estimate, but I know it's not zero, and zero is pretty close to the chance you have of any other kind of approach actually fundamentally fixing this country. So that's the available path right now.
And I wish that people were paying more attention to that pathway. Bruce, I want to ask you one more subjective question. As a kid who gets on a train, goes to Ottawa to look at the Parliament buildings and walk around the nation's capital, and get the sense of what the establishment that made this country what it is, that built your home, and now seeing those same buildings, how has your perspective changed over the years?
Oh, sure. Well, as a youngster, you see those buildings as honorable things, places where honorable people do their work to make the country better. Now they are symbols of where the power is held, and power itself is the problem. Power corrupts. I mean, unless you have figured out a way to limit the ability of those with power to exercise that power, then you are likely to run into these kinds of situations. And whatever internal limits there once maybe were in this country, honorable people doing honorable things, abiding by the idea of the rule of law. After all, the rule of law is largely just an idea. It's the idea that the power of governments is supposed to be limited. When the people who are in power do not respect that idea anymore, then the idea is gone. And you can't hold them in check by citing the idea because nobody believes in it. I mean, the rule of law is inconvenient to the people who think their job is to manage stuff, because management means you need to turn on a dime, and see this problem and respond with this policy and do this directive. And that is not the rule of law. And the reason for having the rule of law, it's not just inconvenient. That's the reason. It's there to prevent that kind of governance. And so you have to do away with it if you believe your job is to manage. So those institutions, and by the way, it's not just Ottawa. Like, it's not just Parliament. It's not just the federal government. I mean, the problems that we're describing are also rampant in provincial governments across the country of all political stripes. Yeah. They are rampant in municipalities and in counties and school boards and so on, in professional regulators. This is a whole of government problem. And the institutions have been taken by a set of ideas, and those ideas are acting to the detriment of the people.
Yeah, and I think the only way to really change anything is to change the culture.
Yes,
because I feel like we are I feel like we are suffering from a cultural disease. I talk to a lot of people. Like I said, I've been getting recognized more and more often lately, and I'm the type of person, if you walk up to me on the street, if you don't scream Nazi in my face, I'll talk to you. Right. Which has happened, and which under these new laws, me being accused of Nazi could put them in jail for the rest of their lives. So watch out, guys.
Well, maybe or maybe not.
It depends what ideology they serve.
Right.
But you know, when I talk to people, a lot of the sentiment that I hear from people, especially the metropolitan types, is, well, I mean, look at what Trump did to us. Look at what I don't feel comfortable going to the United States now. I'm scared to go to the US. Look at what Trump's trying to do to us. He's trying to take us over. Like, you know, and it's, to me, I feel like we are trapped in this culture of victimhood that people don't even realize they're a part of. And it's, in a way, it's because we've, since the early 80s, since Pierre Trudeau, people have been trained to believe that they are these vulnerable beings who need to be protected by the tyranny of the state. That if they travel too far away from the protection of the state, that they will get burned, they will get hurt. So they have to stay complacent and stay there and never move. And where we are now, this series of bills, which isn't even the worst of it, I don't think, but we are entering the logical conclusion of this frame of thinking.
Oh, sure. And there's more to come. There's more aspects to it for sure. You know, there's the old Bill C-63 that the new, you know, C-9 includes a part of that, but it's not the whole thing. And I'm sure the rest of it's still to come. Yeah. There's the digital currency and the digital ID that's on the table, and so on and so forth. For sure. There's yes. And I don't disagree with your diagnosis, but there are also other things like the Canadian knee-jerk anti-Americanism, which has been part of our national psyche forever, partly because the country, if I can put it this way, the country partially exists to be that. I mean, that's how the country came into being, as a resistance to the Americans taking over the continent. You know, the Brits still had a colony, right? And so a lot of Canada is there to be anti-American. That's sort of the historical origin, and we haven't been able to ditch that impulse, even though we don't understand where it comes from. It's there. It's very damaging, very stupid. It creates. I've described it as creating a kind of national schizophrenia, in the sense that you know we are dependent on the Americans for commerce, for military protection. They're our closest ally. We have a culture that is almost the same, not quite the same, but it's the most recognizable culture that we have. They are our closest friend and our greatest enemy, because we despise them, and we say so at every turn. Why? God only knows. Because we have this cultural, historical impulse that we come by honestly and can't get rid of.
Yeah, and it's like, Bruce, do you have siblings?
Yes.
Okay. I've always viewed Canada. I mean, this is a very cliched analogy, but the big brother, little brother.
Of course. Yes, I've used it myself.
Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, if you have a kid brother, I have a little brother. And, you know, growing up, my brother tagged along to everything that I did.
Yes,
right. Couldn't get in any trouble, because the moment I did, he'd go home and tell my mom. Right.
Right.
Well, we're at the stage. We recently entered the stage in this relationship where the United States says, okay, man, it's time for you to start
100%.
pulling your weight. You got to start pulling your weight.
Let's just fill in the metaphors, because it's a very good one, right?
Yeah.
So you have the little brother, and the little brother can get you into trouble when you misbehave, but also at the same time, you protect him for whatever he does on the outside. Like if you're on both on the street and he gets into trouble, you'll protect him. No questions asked, because he's your little brother. So he can misbehave, he can get you into trouble, but you're responsible enough to take care of him anyway. Okay?
Yeah.
We expect that from the Americans. We expect that they will protect us, and they will look after us, and they will provide for us, and we can criticize them till the cows come home. And the Americans have finally said, you know what? We've had this. Grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an entitlement that permeates through everything.
100%.
and the way it's often interpreted is, well, the government has to give me this and has to give me that.
Sure.
It really, like, we are, like, I feel like we're a nation of beggars. We're always, these are my entitlements. This is what the government has to give me. This is, you know what I mean? And it's like, guys, like, do you realize, like, I feel like the system that we're in is designed to create an increased deference to authority and an increased dependence.
Deference to authority is built into our Constitution. I mean,
right.
Peace, order, and good government. Not life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Peace, order, and good government is the Canadian way. And, my Energy Pro colleagues have made the case that Canada, from the very beginning was put together not because of the vision of some grand noble country, but the promise of bribes and grants from the federal government. Newfoundland and BC and the railway and Quebec, and no, you only join because of what you can get out of it. I mean, one of my colleagues put it this way: Canada is a cartel held together by bribes.
Yeah. And
we all want our piece of the bribe. We think we're entitled to it. We think that's what government is for. That's not a good vision for a country.
No. And again, it goes down, to a deep cultural sickness that we're all infected with.
Yep.
And, now we have, to make matters worse, we have this, like, inflammatory effect with this ideology that kind of reinforces the illness and makes it worse, right? Because we're sick, and now we have this thing making us sicker because this thing tells us that all of us, it's to some degree or another, are entitled to some form of victim status.
Well, there may be a very deep-seated belief that on the part of, many people, that actually without the government, we actually can't do it. Mm. Like, if you really think that you can't do it any other way, then you're not going to want to try.
Bruce, in closing, because I don't want to burn you out, man. I need to drag you back in here at least 4 or 5 more times, so I don't want to wear out my welcome with you. This is a deeper question, and one that I think leads to a bigger conversation, but we can keep it short for the sake of time and for the sake of your time. My time doesn't matter. The pastor at my church a couple weeks ago gave a sermon on identity, talking about identity, and it was one that really spoke to me because this is right along the lines of the things that you and I have talked about. The danger in a state bestowing the identity upon an individual, mm-hmm. right? And it made me think afterwards that what we're missing is the common cause, the unifying force, the central action, right? It seems like we're kind of in this weird Tower of Babel sort of situation where all of us speak a separate language now. We can't communicate with each other, right? Uh-huh. Is it possible, Bruce? And again, I'm posing this question to you as a philosopher. Is it possible that the central action that we're missing is God? And I'm not asking this in a religious context. I'm asking this question from a purely philosophical context.
Well, it's possible that the answer is yes, but I don't think that. So here's the difficulty with your question. Different people are going to come to different answers to that question.
Yeah.
And without the state, without the law, that's the way it's going to be. And in other words, if you live in a pluralist society, which is what we have now, then you're going to have people of all different kinds of opinions disagreeing on fundamental things. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You're never going to get back to if we ever had one, but maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But let's say for a moment that we did. Let's say at one point, there was a society where you had a common vision about important things. Okay? You're never going to get that back. That is over. So I wish people would stop wishing for that and instead try to imagine the legal regime that we could have to allow all of us to do our own thing without interfering with other people, because that's the only way forward. Some of those people are going to base their lives on their belief in God, and that is great. Good for them. Other people are not. And the people who make the first choice can't interfere with the other people. You got to leave them alone and do their own thing. Now, if the question is it possible to have a peaceful society without a unitary, coherent, shared vision of those kinds of things? If the answer is yes, you can't do it. Well, then we can't do it because it's done. It's done. And there's a lot of longing that I hear from people, longing to go back to something. Okay? That is not happening. That's not going to happen. Let it go.
Okay. See, and this is why I asked the question, because the way I look at this is I don't consider myself, I attend a church. I call myself Christian, but I don't consider myself a religious Christian. I actually approach the teachings of Jesus Christ as more in a philosophical context. I see him more as a philosopher than anything else. And see when I say that, I think of it as, I may interpret it as God, you may interpret it as law, somebody else may interpret it as morality. But it's this central. What I feel is that we've become disconnected from the common cause.
Yes, well, we may very well have, but I want to make a distinction though between those two things and the third thing. Okay. So so philosophy or religion or morals and the law. Okay. So I've talked to lots of people about the law, obviously. But a lot of them confuse two things, both of which have the word law in them. Okay? God's law and the law, or man's law. Okay? Two completely different things. Different spheres. When I talk about the law, I only mean the rules that somebody has the power to impose upon you. They may be moral or immoral. They may be right or wrong. They might be desirable or undesirable. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what happens in a courtroom. Courts will tell you what the law is. The Supreme Court of Canada tells us what the law is. Now, they may be right or wrong about their reasoning. Doesn't matter. Their conclusion is the law. And God's law has nothing to do with it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, some people want to live according to God's law. More power to them. Great. But you've got this other law that is also the problem. Okay. Don't confuse them. If you're assuming that God's law and the law are going to resemble each other, or that the law should reflect what you think God's law is, don't waste your time. I mean, like that's a frivolous, purposeless exercise. That's not how the law works. That's not how the law is developed. That's not how the law is decided. That is not owning up to the reality of the governance situation that we're in.
Bruce, I could listen to you read a cookbook, my brother. It's, man, I have so many more questions, but I'm going to save them because I don't want to burn you out. I know you have important things to do in your life, far more important than talking to me. But
I can't think of any, but thank you, Jason.
Well, like I said, man, the moment I started reading about these bills, I was like, I got to reach out to Bruce again. I got to try to drag you back in here because, the difficult thing is, okay, so, for example, this recent episode with John Carpe, he did a fantastic job of breaking down these bills, what's in them, how they conflict with our constitutional rights, the danger in it for society and the individual. But and not to take anything away from his message, because it's really important. People need to understand that. like just on a superficial level, understanding how this affects your life and what it could potentially do to you as a person.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a deeper philosophical conversation to be had around this. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because this goes so much deeper than just they're trying to take you off the internet. They're trying to make everything hate speech. They want to go through your phone. They want to take your data. There's something much deeper, a deeper disease, and something that we have yet to properly or correctly diagnose. And I think you're the only one who gets it. And by the way, for everybody watching, Bruce's draft for an independent Alberta constitution is right below this video yet again, because I want people to read it. Because
thank you.
It's last night in preparation for the conversation, I read it again. And what really came clear to me upon second reading was that this is not just a draft for a constitution for a new independent nation, but it's a draft for the way society should operate, period.
I hope.
It is. Period. End of story. And what's funny is that our last episode, the bots always come out with every episode that I do now, and as things travel, right? And the main thing is Bruce Pardy is an anarchist. Bruce Pardy is an anarchist. Bruce Pardy wants anarchy, and I'm like, no, Bruce Pardy just wants freedom in a responsible society, right? And that's the vision, is just creating a society of responsible human beings who, with minimal government and minimal supervision. And if you fuck up, you go to jail like anybody else. Right.
Right. Sure.
But it's the natural response from people who are so dependent on their status as victims and slaves that they will not accept freedom when they see it.
Yes. And there are a lot of people with status that have status for a different reason as well. I mean, some people are embedded into the machine, and in order for them to continue to prosper in that spot, they need that system to continue. So there's going to be a lot of resistance from all different kinds of people for different kinds of reasons why the system that we have should not be fundamentally reformed. And that's one of the challenges, and it's going to be a challenge in Alberta. If Alberta, gets on a path to succeeding in this enterprise, that's going to be one of the major challenges. The people inside Alberta who have status in the system that exists are going to be very resistant to fundamental change.
Yeah. Can we get the Canada out of Alberta? That was exactly. my favorite takeaway from our last conversation is, how do you purge Canada from Canadians?
100%.
It's a very difficult task. Yep. Bruce, before we get out of here, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. So rightsprobe.org is the website of the think tank that we run. All our material is on there. You can also follow me on Substack and on X at Pardy Bruce.
Bruce, man, thank you once again for humoring me and jumping back in with me. I know we just spoke a few weeks ago, and I was really apprehensive, because I know regardless of what you say, I know you're a busy guy. I know you have things going on. So I really appreciate you jumping back in with me. And I can't say I'm not going to reach out again in the very near future, but I'll try to wait a few extra weeks.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Really, it's great. And I'm so happy you are thinking this way about the problem, because we need to do that.
Well, honestly, I'm going through a lot of transformations in my life as well. As you get older as a man, you hopefully get wiser. But, spiritual transformations and a changing of the way that I view the world, a changing of the way that I view people. And the thing is, what's interesting to me is, through doing this podcast, I've had the ability to hold conversations with literally guys who break my processor, like you, break my brain, right? And I get to listen back to it and really put a lot of thought into the things that you had to say. And what I find is that the man that I'm naturally becoming on my own is kind of, in line with the principles and the values that people like you represent and are trying to bring forward and trying to bring to the fore. And so there's just this beautiful synchronicity happening in my life. And honestly, man, I couldn't be more lucky. as a person than to just have these conversations. So Bruce,
Terrific.
Once again, man,
Good to hear.
I really appreciate your time, and I just really appreciate you hearing me and you know, throwing some meat in the monkey cage for me to chew on. I appreciate it.
Very good.
Thanks, Bruce.
Right. Thank you.